I'm Anthony Davis from 5 Minute News. On the day that the former president, Donald Trump, was indicted by the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, news that is reverberating around the world, and hopefully for the right reasons, because it's very easy to think that this is a kind of a great stain on American history. But actually, one should look at this as justice for a criminal who got elected legitimately in 2016, but continued to commit crimes throughout his presidency. Not least simple things like saying he'd divested involvement in running the Trump Organization, which of course turned out to be a lie, despite the piles of blank paper that he wheeled out on a trolley so that everybody could see that there was paperwork involved. This kind of lack of detail, this very theatrical version of being a kind of fake president in name only, where you know nothing about the law, you know nothing about politics, you don't understand very basic levels of civic engagement. My view personally is that he should have been impeached on the fourth day of his presidency when he announced a total ban on all Muslims entering the United States, and to quote, "until we can work out what the hell is going on." I mean, that again is an example of how the white supremacy and the racism and the bigotry and the xenophobia is really at the very front of everything that he did when it came to foreign policy, referring to shithole countries and just talking about the United States in isolation, which with a global economy and with a capitalist system, you simply can't do. And he alienated all of the international partners, he alienated most of the European leaders, and the ones he befriended were the autocrats and the dictators, the Kim Jong-un and the Vladimir Putin and the Viktor Orban. These are the people that he felt like he had something in common with, because their behavior, their autocracy was very much what he wanted. You know, he joked about being a president forever. Well, Xi Jinping has done a very similar thing. Vladimir Putin himself has served 22 years and has rewritten the constitution to enable him to basically keep to remain in power. And that's very much what Trump really wanted, because as long as he remained as king and as president of the United States, he could continue to claim presidential privilege and commit as many crimes as he wanted. And he made more money, as we know, during his presidency than even before he was president, leveraging the power of the presidency, the exclusivity, the most powerful man in the world, taking advantage of that, using his family members and his son-in-law to really kind of be his proxy business people. And so that's what he did. And even with the recent charging of Alan Weisselberg at the Trump Organization, a guy who basically took the rap for all of Trump's crimes, we're now starting to see an unraveling of Donald Trump in terms of him coming face to face with the law that he has somehow managed to evade for most of his adult life. So I'm not celebrating, but I recognize that this is an important moment. It's not historic. I don't care about the fact that no previous president has been indicted before. That doesn't interest me. What interests me is that somebody who so overtly breaks the law, somebody who so overtly has distaste and disdain for the country that he claims to be a patriot for, is finally being held to account. And that's really what matters. Now, he has issued a statement this afternoon from the president via his Make America Great Again 2024 campaign, which I'll just read to you. He writes, "This is political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history. From the time I came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower, and even before I was sworn in as your President of the United States, the radical left Democrats, the enemy of hardworking men and women of this country, have been engaged in a witch hunt to destroy the Make America Great Again movement. You remember it just like I do. Russia, Russia, Russia. The Mueller hoax. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Impeachment hoax 1. Impeachment hoax 2. The illegal and unconstitutional Mar-a-Lago raid. And now this. Well, let me just pause for a second to explain to you that kind of roll call of his crimes are very neatly presented there by the disgraced former president. Of course, when he talks about the enemy of hard-working men and women of this country, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. As you know, Democrats are the ones who support the unions. Democrats are the ones, as you know, who are trying to raise the minimum wage. Democrats are the ones who are trying to make work pay for people. And Donald Trump didn't do any of those things during his presidency. He says the Russia, Russia, Russia Mueller hoax. Well, of course, it's been proven time and time again that everything that Robert Mueller wrote about in that presentation was true. It was paraphrased by William Barr, the former Attorney General, to give the impression that Donald Trump was exonerated. But he wasn't. It's just nobody took the time in that time frame to read such a large report. And so, again, that in itself could be considered a crime, to rewrite effectively or miscommunicate and provide misinformation to the greater public at large when a special counsel has been given the job of investigating the former president. And then, of course, he talks about the Ukraine impeachment hoax. Well, that was a perfect phone call, he called it. Not two words I've ever heard used in the same sentence before. But, of course, that was recorded. We've all heard it. He tried to extort Volodymyr Zelensky, withholding support in return for him investigating Joe and Hunter Biden. And that was, of course, reported by officials listening in on the call because they knew that what he'd done was against the law. And then finally, the impeachment hoax 2, as he calls it, which was when he basically had his people storm the Capitol. He told them to go to the Capitol, and he was the one that created and masterminded and went through with an insurrection. Something that you don't normally hear associated with the United States, but somehow Donald Trump managed to bring about an insurrection, a coup in plain sight. And then he talks about the Mar-a-Lago raid, which was not a raid. That was, of course, a legal search done with a search warrant that was applied for and signed by a judge, and it was done in the presence of Donald Trump's lawyers. So these things are all very clear if you take the time to explain them, if you take the time to or take an interest in these stories. But if you just listen to him shouting into the void, you can hear that all of his grievances are things that really get to him. They upset him because ultimately he's done wrong. He's broken the law. And the thing that upsets him the most is that he's been caught. He then says the Democrats have lied, cheated, and stolen in their obsession with trying to get Trump. But now they've done the unthinkable, indicting a completely innocent person in an act of blatant election interference. I mean, how he can blame Democrats for election interference when he is being indicted for effectively paying a bribe to somebody during his election campaign. He then goes on to say, never before in our nation's history has this been done. The Democrats have cheated countless times over the decades, including spying on my campaign, but weaponizing our justice system to punish a political opponent who just so happens to be a president of the United States. He seems to think he's still the president, and by far the leading Republican candidate for president has never happened before, full stop, ever, full stop. He then goes on to criticize Alvin Bragg. He says Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who was handpicked and funded by George Soros, not true, is a disgrace. Rather than stopping the unprecedented crime wave taking over New York City, he's doing Joe Biden's dirty work, ignoring the murders and burglaries and assaults he should be focused on. This is how Bragg spends his time. It's a shame that it's me reading this. I would really like to hear this in Donald Trump's voice because maybe I lend an air of authority to this kind of very sad, whiny, bad grammar that he has, written clearly in a hurry, or maybe he's had a couple of weeks to work on this, who knows. He says, I believe this witch hunt will backfire massively on Joe Biden. Of course, this has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It was Trump that basically ran the kind of, his attorney general as his own personal lawyer. This is not how Joe Biden runs the executive branch. It's completely separate to, in this case, the state of New York and to the Manhattan DA's office. The American people realize exactly what the radical left Democrats are doing here. Everyone can see it, so our movement and our party, united and strong, will first defeat Alvin Bragg, and then we will defeat Joe Biden, and we are going to throw every last one of these crooked Democrats out of office so we can make America great again. He means white again, obviously, because that's his obsession, is eugenics. Now, you don't need me to tell you what's really going on here. This stream of consciousness, this anger, this bile, this does not sound like a good person, does not sound like an innocent person, does not sound like somebody who is, caught up in a case of mistaken identity. It sounds like a person squealing because they are banged to rights. And then finally on Truth Social, he posted, these thugs and radical left monsters have just indicted, but he spelt it indicated, the 45th President of the United States of America and the leading Republican candidate by far for the 2024 nomination for president. This is an attack, now all in capitals, on our country, the likes of which has never been seen before. It is likewise a continuing attack on our once free and fair elections. The USA is now a third world nation, a nation in serious decline. So sad, he says. Well, the sadness, I think, is all very much with him. I am not sad today, and I'm sure you are not sad either, because to have somebody who is so corrupt, so dangerous, and so volatile, running the country, trying to run the country as a candidate for the next presidential election is really not conducive to the growth and prosperity of the United States. I am very keen for the Republican Party to reconvene. I would love them to get a candidate who is eloquent and who has a social conscience, who doesn't wear a AR-15 pin badge the same day as a school shooting. I would like to see the United States move forward like the rest of the world has. The rest of the world does not have violent crime or school shootings. The rest of the world does not ban abortion or prevent women from getting access to health care. Only the United States, under Donald Trump and his extremist MAGA Republicans, has rolled back, to the 1950s, where, lynchings were normal. And we saw under Donald Trump's tenure the likes of Ahmaud Arbery being lynched by 3 white men who thought that they could get away with it because Donald Trump was president. Derek Chauvin executing a innocent man, George Floyd, on the streets of Minneapolis, knowing he'll probably get away with it because Donald Trump is the president. That is the effect of the Donald Trump presidency, that there is a kind of civil unrest, and that suddenly the norms, the social norms, fall apart. And I would also say, finally, I would like to live in a country where the president doesn't gas his own people on his way through a peaceful protest to do a photo op, buzzing protesters with military helicopters and disappearing people off the streets of Portland, unmarked officers in unmarked cars. I mean, that is not what the United States is all about, and yet that happened just 2 short years ago. So that is who Donald Trump is. He is an authority figure, an autocrat, and a very dangerous one. And today, on Thursday, he has been indicted by the Manhattan DA for one crime. There are so many more crimes to come. There are so many other DAs, special counsels, and legal eagles who are looking at his many crimes. And I'm sure that he will have to face the music in the coming days. So, thank you for joining me. And please stay with 5 Minute News for more updates on the disgraced former president, Donald Trump. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5 Minute News podcast and on Sundays hosting The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.